Welcome to the Jacksonville First Seventh-day Adventist Church podcast, where we listen, learn, and love together. Our speaker today is Pastor Jonathan Panado.
And so we continue this morning in our sermon series on the Sabbath, because Jesus encountered the Sabbath, and Jesus had things to teach us about the Sabbath. This is our third sermon in our four-part series. Yes, there is a fourth sermon where we are going to look at the Sabbath at the end of time is what we're going to do. That's going to be the fourth sermon that we preach on the Sabbath and the end of time, the Sabbath and the Apocalypse. But we want to do a review first of our first two sermons. We noticed that Jesus and the New Testament apostles worshipped on what day? The Sabbath, that's right. They worshipped on the Sabbath. They went to the synagogue on the Sabbath. The Bible says that they taught on the Sabbath. They read from the Scriptures on the Sabbath. They preached from the Scriptures on the Sabbath. We found out that it was only after their death that the Christian church began to worship on Sunday. In the Gospels, there are approximately 45 references to the Sabbath. Each Gospel takes note to mention the Sabbath, and every mention of the Sabbath in the Gospels is intentional and significant. We learned that the foundational passage in the Bible for the Sabbath is found in what book? And what chapter of the Bible? Genesis. And what chapter? Chapter 2. That's right. The Sabbath, we learned from Genesis chapter 2, was instituted for all humankind. Just like marriage was instituted in Eden for all humankind, so the Sabbath was instituted for all humankind in Eden. And it was made for three purposes. Do you remember what they are? Resting. That's right. Both physical and spiritual resting. That's right. It's for a blessing, for an encounter with God on the Sabbath, and also for holiness. That's right. Holiness. It's a sign of our commitment to God that He is transforming us, that He is changing us. Just like marriage is a sign of commitment to one another, the Sabbath becomes a sign of commitment to God. Now, the first how-to passage, how to keep the Sabbath, the first how-to keep the Sabbath, that first how-to passage in the Old Testament is found in what book and chapter of the Bible? Exodus, good. Chapter 16. Exodus chapter 16, that's right. And in Exodus chapter 16, we learn a principle of how to keep the Sabbath. And what is that principle? Sabbath preparation. That's right. Sabbath preparation is the story of the manna, and God tells them to collect twice as much on Friday so that they don't have to go out and collect manna on the Sabbath. It's a principle of preparation. And so we, as Seventh-day Adventists, we believe in preparing for the Sabbath. And so yesterday I took out my shirt and I started ironing it and, choosing my tie and, what I'm going to wear. My wife, prepared the meal for today. We prepare so that the Sabbath can be a blessing. So that the Sabbath can be a blessing, so that we can fully enter into the rest. When we fail to prepare, Sabbaths become quite hectic, and we can lose that blessing. So in Exodus chapter 16, the first principle, the first how-to passage, and that's the principle of Sabbath preparation. The second passage of how to keep the Sabbath is found in what book and chapter of the Bible? What book? Exodus, again, yes. And what chapter? Chapter 20. That's right, good. Just a couple chapters after Exodus 16. This is the second how to keep the Sabbath holy is found in Exodus chapter 20. And the command about the Sabbath is to not do what? Not to do work. Okay, good. Very good. Yeah, work. Work, the idea is engaging in our commercial activities that we do, in our work that we do all during the week. Where the Bible says, thou shalt not work. That commandment not to work extends to children. That's right, your children. Parents, again, you have the right to tell your children what to do and what not to do. They do live in your home. The Sabbath commandment to rest and not to work also extends to? Yes, guests. Yes. Servants, that's right. And what do we call servants today? Employees. Sorry, no. Employees. That's what I call servants today. Employees. How many of you are an employee? The Sabbath rest extends to the foreigners as well. That's what the commandment says. Again, the Sabbath was not just for the Israelites, it was for everyone. Everyone was commanded to rest. Anyone living in your house is commanded to rest, commanded to not work. Now, we also learned another interesting principle in Nehemiah chapter 13. Do you remember Nehemiah? What was going on in Nehemiah chapter 13? What were people doing in Nehemiah chapter 13? Remember that? They were working commercial activities is what was going on. Merchants were coming and they were buying things and they were selling things on the Sabbath. And Nehemiah told the Israelites not to do that. It's the Sabbath. You're not to engage in commercial activities on the Sabbath. And so they said, all right, fine. And then who else started coming in and selling stuff? Foreigners started selling stuff. And Nehemiah said, no one is supposed to engage in commercial activities on the Sabbath. Then he shut the gates, and then what they decided to do was hang out around the wall on the Sabbath and, peddle their stuff from the wall to passerbys. And Nehemiah came down and he said, get out of here. If you don't get out of here and stop doing this, I'm going to arrest you. And sure enough, that took care of the problem. And so the principle that we find here is that God is calling us not only to abstain from work, but he's also calling us to not engage, as a general rule, not engage in commercial activities on the Sabbath as well. Oh boy, what does that mean? As Adventists, we understand that commercial activities could possibly include going out to eat at restaurants, going out and doing shopping on Sabbath, running errands on Sabbath, any kind of business pursuits. In fact, in Isaiah chapter 58, it says, it uses this word, it says, if you turn from the Sabbath, doing as you please, or doing your own pleasure on the Sabbath day. And that word for pleasure in Isaiah chapter 58 specifically has to do with business matters or commercial pursuits. We don't engage in those kinds of matters on the Sabbath. But at the same time, the Bible tells us that we should call the Sabbath a delight. The Sabbath should be joyful. And it also needs to be kept holy. And so sometimes we struggle with having fun and holiness. Don't they seem mutually exclusive? Either it's holy or if it's fun, and if it's fun, it must not be holy, and if it's holy, it must not be fun. I don't know, right? No, but the Sabbath the Bible says that the Sabbath needs to be all three: a delight, a joy, and also holy. And so there's a tension. What non-commercial activities can we engage in on the Sabbath that are enjoyable, delightful, fun, and in harmony with the holiness of the Sabbath? And so I encourage you, and the Bible doesn't give a list. The Bible doesn't give a list. It just gives these principles, but I encourage you to take these principles and then apply your common sense to these principles. Now, the Bible doesn't give a list, but ask yourself, what is the effect of this activity? So you're engaging on an activity on Sabbath. Ask yourself that question. What is the effect of this activity? Going outside, having fun, running, cycling, swimming on Sabbath, throwing a ball on Sabbath. Are those wrong? Throwing a frisbee on Sabbath, are they wrong? Going on hikes, playing games, doing fun activities, are those wrong on the Sabbath? Ask yourself, what is the effect of this activity? I personally find that these types of activities, going outside on the Sabbath, and they actually speak to creation. And they speak to God giving us a body and being able to enjoy nature. It goes back to creation. So I enjoy going out on Sabbaths, and I don't have a pool, but if I would, I'd probably go for a dip or two. I have a tendency to throw balls on Sabbath, frisbees on Sabbath, any kind of activity outside on Sabbath. A second question, though, that you have to ask yourself is, what are the associations of this activity? So, associations are personal. I can throw a football on Sabbath, and I can kick a soccer ball on Sabbath, and I'm okay. But if you put a tennis ball in my hand on Sabbath, things change. Because there are certain associations that I have with a tennis ball. And on Sabbaths, I need to stay away from a tennis ball. So what are the associations of that activity? And the associations will be different for everyone. Another question that you can ask yourself as well is, what is the maturity level? Especially when we're speaking about children. What is their maturity level? So I can throw a frisbee, I can throw a football, and it's okay, but maybe a child who's younger than me grabs a football in their hand and it's not okay. Things switch in their mind. Are you guys following me? So what is their maturity level? For example, we have a ping pong table out here in the fellowship hall, and it's out all week long, and I asked our student literature evangelist on Sabbath to put it away. Not because I think playing ping pong on Sabbath is wrong, but because there may be others in this church, mainly those who are young among us, that may not necessarily understand about how to interact with a ping pong table on Sabbath. Are you following me? Yes. Following me? Okay, so what's the maturity level? I noticed that at Camp Kalakwa for camp meeting, there was a sign by the spring, and it said, "No swimming on Sabbath." That's right. Have you guys seen that sign? It's right there. And I saw that sign and I said, why? Is it because swimming is bad on Sabbath? No, but imagine, I don't think they even allow swimming during the week, imagine the liability issues of all these kids jumping in the water on Sabbath, And so the question is, what is the maturity level? What is the maturity level? What is the effect of this activity? What are the associations of this activity? And what is the maturity level? We also discourage watching secular TV on Sabbath, video games as well on Sabbath, and other kinds of secular activities because the Sabbath is holy. Sabbath is holy. And there's no list out there, but these are principles. These are principles that we want you to wrestle with.
This podcast is brought to you by the Jacksonville First Seventh-day Adventist Church. Connect with them at www.jaxsda.org or on Facebook and YouTube. We look forward to sharing more inspiring messages with you.